who's going to pay for all the cleanup? Likely a question on the minds of a lot of folks in the Gulf region. As you know, the oil spill continues to spread far and wide. Some estimates put the total cost of the cleanup of the mess as high as $20 billion, maybe more. Who really knows what it's going to do yet? The White House has said that BP will ultimately pay for all this, but that could take years. And that has put Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal in a really rough spot. So far, he's been forced to shell out a whole lot of state money to contain the disaster as best he can. Same goes for folks who rely on the Gulf to make a living. So how can Gulf Coast states and folks living there recoup their losses? With us now, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. This is a tough one for...
Yeah, it is a tough one because the government is partially to blame for this in this respect. The government put a safety net under BP in the form of caps on the exposure that they had. So BP knew that if it could cover itself for the maximum $75 million cleanup that the federal law says is the most they should have to pay, and $1 billion compensation to property owners for their loss, which is the maximum they'd have to pay, BP knew that as long as it covered that, it could be as careless as it wanted. This was an accident. I'm not suggesting that they were reckless or they intentionally looked the other way, but they had no financial incentive to stay with their eye on the ball. If I pour a pollutant in a stream behind your house and I've polluted that water, I'm responsible for every homeowner downstream whose water has been polluted. There's no cap on that. I am presumed to intend the consequences of my behavior, and I must pay for them. Not so with BP, because the federal government in 1990 entered the picture and changed the common law, changed the natural law, changed the statutory law, and changed Economics 101 and said, cover yourself for $1.075 billion and then be as reckless as you want, and nobody can sue you. Now they are confronted with a potential catastrophic loss. The estimates, as you just indicated, go as high as $20 billion. Question, how can the people, the innocent landowners who've been harmed, the father of the dead boy that you just interviewed, how can these people cause a court to bust those caps? Do you think a jury in that part of the United States of America and a judge in that part of the United States of America is going to enforce those caps?
Well, it would depend. That would certainly be jury nullification if they didn't, I guess, if that's the right parlance.
Here's how it can be done. The governor of Louisiana, who's in a financial political pickle now, waiting for the federal government to give him permission to build the barrier islands. Tell the feds to go take a hike. Build those islands. Protect the shoreline. And then send a bill to the federal government. And if they don't pay it, sue them. And private property owners can do the same thing. Do what you have to protect your own property and then go after BP or go after the federal government, which shouldn't have given BP the cap limitations.
Do you see the governor, as I've read today, where some see him as in a bit of a political pickle, because if you remember, he was the one, quite unceremoniously, who was the response to a State of the Union address.
Right.
It didn't go very well, and in it he talked about how government is not what we're about our people, and we don't believe in big government, we think government should not be involved. Therefore, there were those making the suggestion that, well, now he's got to live with his own words. But you could take it back to the point where the government intervened and said, here are the caps.
Exactly.
And then it fits his storyline.
Exactly, because the government changed the rules, that you are responsible for the harm you caused, that you have to have insurance to cover the maximum harm, not the minimum harm. Because the federal
government... Why would they
get
that protection?
Because the law is not necessarily logical, it's political.
Yeah.
Because the Clinton administration and a Republican Congress, it was both parties that did this, wanted to encourage certain amounts of offshore drilling. So they said to these guys, if the oil gets out there and it costs more than $1.075 billion, don't worry about it. That's crazy. That's insane. We now know, after Katrina and after this, we cannot rely on the federal government to protect us from these disasters. That government is best which governs least. That government is best which is closest to the people, which understands their problems, and which knows how to address their needs, and which doesn't take years to decide whether or not to build the barrier islands.